I have been working with the natural world for about 23 years, I guess, or about 20 years. Before that, I was an abstract painter. So, what seems to happen in my life is contradiction. When I lived in Vermont for 9 years, I was an abstract painter. When I moved to New York, I began to deal with landscape. And what changed my life was in 1985, my first trip to Israel, and seeing the desert. Coming from New Orleans, where everything is hot and humid and sultry, and you throw a seed on the ground and it grows in about 5 seconds, and you know, we have all the stories of sultry evenings and even hotter days and sensuous nights. Finding the desert was an experience, was really a revelation for me, and my work started to change immediately. I completely gave up my abstract concepts, well, not the concepts, but I gave up abstraction, and started looking for landscapes all over the world that were desert-oriented, so that I could feel that environment, because it was so interesting to me. And then I worked on a variety of landscape, all sorts of landscape, until, as we said, 9/11. And that, again, was a pivotal point in my life where I changed subject matter to become more specific, dealing with the leaves. Yeah, and with the landscapes, I shoot as I'm walking around. With the leaves, I bring all the leaves back to the studio, and I set up a black ground, and then arrange the leaves, and then put my camera on a tripod and shoot a whole bunch of things. And what's interesting about the leaves, for me, is that the process of using them fresh is, you can do that for a few days, perhaps a week, then they start to dry and they start to change color and they start to change shape. So I have, for example, in the sea grape leaves, which are the drawings and the 2 smaller paintings, I have about 3 weeks in which to work before they become, you know, sort of gray.
Instead of developing a signature style with a camera and going all around the world photographing different places, and certainly nothing wrong with that, but instead of doing that, I thought, what if I brought a bunch of different cameras to the same place and photographed it over time, so that I would have a lot of, you know, long study of one single place, and it would also talk about changing photographic technologies and tastes. But there is that sense of personal memory that goes with images of landscape. And as I've done Evans Pond and exhibited it over the years, people often come to me and say, are you from Buffalo? Are you from Israel? There's a landscape exactly like that where I grew up. And it just made me think, you know, this is amazing. People seem to carry landscapes within them. You know, it seems to be a very deep memory for many people.
I was very taken with the dichotomy of our perception of nature in the urban, you know, setting. You have this kind of nurturing nature, and you have a more threatening one, and the two coexist. But I think there's a tension that exists in the mind of nearly every New Yorker. So I just tried to set down some thoughts. I mean, you have kind of this bucolic reality of nature that's dominated by man, like in Central Park. I mean, Frederick Law Olmsted thought of, you know, creating a haven where beleaguered, you know, industrial revolution, you know, workers could walk home and forget about their day's, you know, travails in this beautiful romantic English garden. It's a kind of unthreatening refuge, a place that reduces the stress of the working day. Then you have trees and flowers along avenues in the city, and potted plants and lucky bamboo, you know, plants in the office buildings. But then again, you have the really, you know, destructive force of nature also. I mean, New Orleans is a really, you know, severe case in point. But I mean, the rats and cockroaches. There was a coyote in Central Park recently, but they you know, they weren't able to catch it, I don't think. But you know, there's the story of the alligators in the sewer system of New York City. You know, the sea levels are rising, global warming, the great hurricane of '38. So anyway, all those things, there's an edgier nature, and I guess the edgier side intrigues me more from a sculptural point of view, because it's more interesting. I mean, nature can be beautiful and threatening at the same time, and I guess that's what I look for in my own work. terms of my personal experience too, that, you know, thinking of these extraordinary, you know, trees that I'd seen as a young man, and the spiritual potency of these images within Judaism led me to explore the tree as metaphor, and also thinking about the idiosyncratic and beautiful and mysterious nature of trees and branchings. And also just as a metaphor for growth. I mean, the tree is one of those few beings in nature that grows both up and down. You know, it kind of binds heaven and earth. That's why you have world trees in different cosmologies.
Yeah, I think I could echo a spiritual context as an archetypal basis for my pond project as well, in a way, because my background is, my beliefs are, I'm a Methodist and also have Quaker in my background. And, you know, we study the Old and the New Testament, so, you know, themes of nature and the tree of life and all kinds of symbolism is something that I studied and grew up with as well. But in terms of like consciously, that I think of a literary text or something like that, maybe it's Proust. You know, we don't associate nature, isn't the first thing that comes to mind with, In Search of Lost Time. But there are beautiful descriptions of hawthorns in Proust and beautiful descriptions of astronomical phenomena. He's constantly making these metaphors, and many of them refer to the sun, the moon, the day, the night sky, to stars. And so I found those being rather fascinating in the context of the whole book, which of course is about lost time or time regained. So those themes of time and the natural references are just became integrated with the pond project as I worked on it.
Cormac McCarthy's most recent novel, The Road, in which he describes a post-apocalyptic environment that is so dense with destruction that it is such the antithesis to what I'm doing with my work, but yet I felt that it has a resonance to a life force through all of this destruction. I don't know if you've read the book. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's poetry, it's haiku, it's amazing, and the imagery that he presents is phenomenal in its desolation and its loneliness and its brutality. So maybe what I'm trying to do with my work is to take something that people maybe that take for granted, and do something with it that is different. The most gratifying things that's happened is that people who have seen sea grape leaves say, I've never seen sea grape leaves the way that you are painting them, but now I understand a new way of looking at sea grape leaves.